Welcome to the Productivity Power Hour. Hey, Ron, how are you?
Good, Don. How are you?
Good. Yeah, and I'm excited about the topic today. Overall, we're going to talk about change management. Before we dive into that, hey, Ron, do you want to just tell folks, who you are and sort of what you do?
Yeah, I'm Ron Eggert. I didn't put the letters after my name, but I'm an MBA. I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt. Well, your letters look great, Don. Yeah, I'm an MBA, Lean Six Sigma black belt, PMP. I own a company, Propellant Consulting. You can find us propellantconsulting.com. Go to my LinkedIn page. I offer strategic services, usually in the form of post-merger integration services, executive governance, be it business reviews, EPMOs, and I help executives structure strategic growth and cost initiatives, all the way from basic strategies, thinking ants off matrix, things like that, through execution and project management. And I typically work with micro to mid market cap, and I typically work with life science folks. But as we know, sometimes other industries and things can come in and things like that. So that's me, Don.
Yeah, I keep telling people, I'm like, look, I honestly, I mean, right now I have quite a bit going on with more people outside of life sciences than I do in. However, most of this is driven by our economy as well as the investments in both early stage and mid market companies. I still have late stage companies that I work with. Just a little bit about me. So, similar sort of, kind of overall background, right, in terms of Lean Six Sigma and things like that. My wife would kill me if I didn't put the PhD and MBA up there, given the amount of time that I spent in school.
Yeah.
So, you just have to, sort of, acquiesce a little bit in understanding that my family made a sacrifice as well for, all the hours that I spent in school. But in addition to that, I'm a certified master black belt as well in Lean Six Sigma, and have spent a lot of years coaching companies back from the brink of disaster, as well as just senior executives that are frustrated with the way that things currently are. In addition to that, I run a digital media marketing company. I tell everybody I sort of eat my own dog food with this process improvement and systems and process stuff, and sort of built a company that runs on the systems and processes that we built. And whenever things don't function the way that they're supposed to, I start asking questions about, hey, why doesn't it work that way? Or why didn't things operate the way that they were designed? And we're continually improving. So that, at least for me, is something where I have to be a firm enough believer to use it in my own company.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Don, I gotta say, yeah, PhD and MBA, that is quite the commitment. I couldn't imagine going back to school and getting a PhD. So very much kudos to you and your family for all that sacrifice. I mean, it was hard enough for me to go and get my MBA while I was working. I can't imagine a PhD.
Yeah. Yeah. So today we're going to talk a little bit about change management, just to kind of, kick us off a little bit. So I did a little bit of research, looking at different frequent posts, from people. And I feel like some people really don't get it, right? I mean, when I look at, you've got a post with a 19 sort of element framework or something around change management, you've totally overblown it. I need change management for your change management is the way I feel. And
Yeah,
so it's like,
yeah,
why
exactly.
why can't you make it simple? I think John Cotter, who's most known for writing leading change, is somebody that essentially has, like, I think it's like a 10 or 12 step plan inside of his book. And then ProSci certainly has a lot of different things as well. Another very popular change management plan around ADKAR, but again, that's only sort of 5 elements around quarters, sort of what you have to do to drive change. But would sort of love your take on it as well, because as I looked, I was just like, I was kind of overwhelmed by at least what a lot of consultants say about this stuff.
Yeah, no, it's a good take, Don. Hopefully this isn't a hot take, but I'll be transparent. I've always kind of thought all of those frameworks were a little bit BS. It's not because they're not good. It's I don't see the value in a lot of these frameworks. Yeah, pro Car, and you've got Cotter's, you've got McKinsey's model. You've got the change curve of how people deal with change and stuff. But really, I mean, I don't think any of those things are helpful. I think it just makes change more complicated. And when I advise people on change, I advise them just like you. We need to simplify this. We need to make this simple. Let's not overcomplicate this with a lot of different frameworks. And the way that I think about change is really in two ways. To start, and I advise everybody to think about this. Are we purposefully making change because we think that there's an opportunity or a threat? So we are going to purposely do something that's going to have a business case that is going to see some sort of improvement. Or is this change that is compulsory? We don't get to decide. We have to do this. Bankruptcy is one of those things. Another thing, not necessarily business related, but sometimes in life things get taken from you and you lose things and people, and you have to deal with those changes. So there's a difference between purposeful change and change that you really don't get a choice in. And to me, the fundamental piece of change management is communication. And that's how I advise my clients, is that if you think nothing else, don't worry about ADCAR, Pro-C, don't worry about all these other things. Worry about communicating change, understanding the change. And if you can do that, at the very least, you're going to get people bought in to that change. So I'm sort of with you. I think I see a lot of frustration on LinkedIn, and I've seen a lot of frustration, in the world of PE, in that executives are spending too much time on change. They're spending too much time putting together these overly complex change management plans, and they're not necessarily seeing results, or they're spending money, and it's not saving them time. And for me, it's keep it simple. We want to save time, but we also want to make sure that we communicate. So again, like you, I keep things simple. I guess, Don, how do you approach change with your clients? How do you advise them? Is there a system? I mean, do you adopt one of these frameworks, or do you kind of have your own?
Yeah, so I would say I use a hybrid approach, which essentially is my own. So at General Electric, whenever I worked there for 18 years, they had a process called the change acceleration process, which closely models more or less what John Cotter has, which is hey, look, you need leadership bought in. Sort of under that, you may need leadership to help you drive the message through. And then just having frequent communication, watching for resistance and sort of listening to resistance, but then sort of figuring out how to adjust from there. Then whenever I was at Roche, I became ProSci certified as well, and it comes with kind of a different set of tools. I believe that it's a great tool set. If somebody was going to go implement change, right? So let's say that you don't know what change management is, and you might want to sort of not hire a consultant and figure it out. My suggestion to you is go pick up John Cotter's book, and it's certainly a better start than not doing anything.
Sure.
Because I think that's the other part of this. But the main thing that I oftentimes advise companies in is, look, in any sort of major, let's say, system IT change, organizational change, anything where you're sort of going to add additional friction inside of the company, you had better be thinking about how you're going to communicate, and communicate frequently to the point that you're sick and tired of hearing the same message
Yes.
over and over again. That will be the first sign that you're probably just starting to get through to the people that really needed this the most. And you may think, hey, look, I stood up at town hall and I communicated it once, that's good enough. But the reality is, and this goes back kind of to my education as well, is that most of us adult learners, really need to hear something repeatedly before we
Yeah.
start to hear it. And so, it's not just, family communications, because sometimes spouse to spouse communications, you see this where, one spouse says, well, I told you yesterday, or I told you just an hour ago, or whatever. And the reality is, we just, for whatever reason, we didn't hear it. Maybe you're thinking about something else or whatever. And I see that all the time in change management. And the last thing I'll say about this and kind of hand it back to you is, um, the frameworks for change, although they, like we're saying, in many instances they're overblown, and I wouldn't spend a decade doing this, right? I mean, the better way that I've seen things like this come to fruition is, number one, the executive team or whoever's in the midst of the change sits down and thinks about how we're going to communicate it and sort of writes out a plan. Like, this is what we're going to do, and we're just going to do this repeatedly until people are sick and tired of hearing of it. The second part is, having a method, some method of capturing who's resisting the change and why. Where are they at in that sort of resistance, right? Is it like, hey, look, John or Sally or whoever in the company essentially just sort of saying things that they don't agree with this? Or is there like a full coalition of people that are just like, hey, look, we are flat out against this? And each one of those might need a different level of approach in terms of, okay, so we've said it, we might need to write it down, we might need to present it, we might need to sit down and have, like, I don't know, breakfast and one-on-one meetings, with people, to try and work through whatever it is that's concerning them. But like you said, most companies are either being forced to change or are in the midst of change, hopefully for the better. And both of those situations really are an advantage at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you said something earlier about having to repeat the communication. I've heard something called the rule of five or the rule of seven. And I think that's something around you have to say something to somebody seven times across like seven different modalities for them to really be able to get it. But yeah, I think for me, I even start before the change. So I think of change as we're trying to solve a problem typically. So if we're trying to solve a problem, there isn't change yet. There's just a problem. So we need to talk about it. We need to understand it, define it. Think of something like DMAIC, right? We need to measure it. We need to analyze it. We need to understand it. But we're not just doing that at the executive level. The CEO isn't sitting there thinking, going, okay, I'm going to do this and I want this change. And poof, it happens. He talks or she talks about it with their executive team. And their executive team should be soliciting feedback from their L3 level, right? Then the L4 level, to whatever level we think in the organization is appropriate. We're going to communicate what we think this problem is, what we think the threat is or the opportunity is, right? It's important to continue to communicate that so people understand, oh, here's a problem or an opportunity. So then everybody starts to get bought in. And then you're soliciting feedback on what should we do about it? How should we change? Oftentimes there aren't many. Well, I would say oftentimes there probably are a lot of different ways you can change, depending upon the resources you have. Sometimes there are limited ways you can change, but when you're informing and communicating all the way down, here's the opportunity or threat. Then you're following up with, hey, this is what we think we should do about it. What do you think we should do at each level? And that requires the translation of that all the way down, right? The way you and I think about change is going to be different, excuse me, than maybe the machinist on the floor. But ultimately, the machinists on the floor, their feedback matters. And if you have everybody at a certain level, we'll call them, L1 is CEO, L2, you go all the way down to the bottom level, their feedback very much could be very critical. And again, if we've got a mass group of people that are against this change, it might not even be the right change. We may have decided as an executive team, we may have made the wrong decision. So the best thing to do is before we decide, because you have to make a decision to change, you have to define that problem. You have to make everybody aware of that problem. So much so that again, that you're saying it so much that you become repetitive. Then you need to get their feedback. You need to continue to ask for their feedback. It's a process. The US Army actually does this very well as we do long-term and short-term planning. But then you'll get to a point where now everybody knows what the problem is. Everybody's been involved on what the solution is, and a decision is going to get made. Not everybody's going to be happy with the decision, but the roadmap is there. They were involved in it. Their opinions mattered. They understand, even though they didn't get their way, why we are changing. So now you are in order of magnitude ahead of the game rather than an executive team that sat there, looked at their books, looked at something, and amongst a 5-person team said, we're going to make this humongous change that's going to affect our organization. Now, certainly there are some changes that really don't require feedback at the bottom level, depending upon what they are, but it is best you can to get that feedback, down to the lowest level, so that you've got buy-in is the way that you're going to get people to execute that change for you. Because a plan is just a plan. You put it in a drawer, it'll sit there. But once you make the decision to change and you put a plan together, you need those people to buy in and help you execute. So that's how I think about it. And then that's how I advise my clients. Sure, you can read Cotter's book. You can go to the pro side. You can use all of that stuff. And it is important to evaluate people and have communication, right? You're going to have plans where you're going to evaluate who's against it, who's not. You're going to have town halls. You're going to have Q&As. You're going to have all these things. But making sure everybody has been involved in the decision is what will be the difference in a clean and good change transition to one that is painful and takes up executive time. So that's my soapbox there, Don.
Yeah, I mean, so many organizations, right? I mean, I just kind of think about the overall, right? I mean, so many organizations, especially as they grow, have this challenge where not everybody can make a decision, right? We're not a collective. I mean, we just aren't. and I mean, as much as of a good idea as it would be to like involve, everybody in the final decision, at the end of the day, oftentimes it's like you started with the we have to implement a new ERP system. That ERP system is going to make us better in the end. Here's essentially how we're going to collect feedback and, kind of the key things that we're going to do. And then, by the way, the lowest levels of the organization who may get like something, from it occasionally aren't going to be involved. It's just the way it goes. And,
sure.
And so in that case, making sure that they're, and this for me is where sort of the ADKAR model is like, making sure that at the end of the day that people are aware of the change, they've been informed, if they need something and like training and things like that they're knowledgeable. To me, that model does, somewhat make sense. But at the same time, it's like you said, you just shouldn't overblow it. I mean, yes, think about it. Don't spend, weeks and weeks. And I mean, I definitely, I've been a part of organizations where they want to have like review processes just for change management. And they want to have, in-depth, plans that are, 40, 50 pages of which nobody's following. Right. I mean, at the end of the day,
nobody's
the one person
just,
that's running change management.
Yeah. You're just writing it for sure.
Yeah. So to me, it's a lot like a, what do you call it? Yeah, I mean, we talked about this before with a RACI, right? I mean, a RACI is a great tool inside of an organization to try and understand like who does what when. But at the same time, once it's done and that, put it in the drawer. I mean,
yeah,
like, don't lead your meetings with.
You don't need to pull out your RACI and every meeting. No, I'm 100% with you. And I think just to kind of go back and expound a little bit, on my methodology. It's not so much leaders always get to decide what the problems are, what the priorities are. So in your case, right? Hey, there's a problem right now. Our ERP system cannot do it. It can't handle the scale to which we're growing, right? So you communicate that all the way down. Our ERP system, it's not sufficient. It's not helping. It's not able to do X, Y, Z. So as you keep communicating that, because there's going to be people that love that system. that don't want to change that system, that grew up with that system, that are going to be angry no matter what. But if we communicate to them, hey, this is what the problem is, this is why we're changing, and then we give folks opportunities, and I'm not saying big structured long drawn out things, but we have communication as such, with our executives down to their VPs, their directors, that there's open dialogue as far as feedback, into what this change might look like, because that's good for everybody. We may have decided we pretty much know we're going to go with NetSuite. We're pretty much 100% there, but it doesn't hurt to say, hey, look, we are going to change. We're likely going to go with NetSuite because we think that this is the tool that's going to do XYZ. But we would love to hear everybody's feedback on what you're seeing on the ground, what systems you've seen, even if, maybe it would maybe take the entire company to disagree with you to make a decision against NetSuite. You're still involving people in the process. You're getting buy-in, and you're over communicating, and that's what you need to do. Is just over communicate. And I think that's what we talked about. Is once you get to that level where you're like, "Am I saying this too much?" That's where that you're saying it enough, because people need to hear it. They need to understand. What you don't want to have is all of a sudden a change is happening now, and somebody now has to act and do something and be requested of something where they had never heard of it before. They don't know why we're changing. There's no they have no idea why. They haven't heard of it before, and that's what shocks people. Even if it might be rational to change, even if the business case is there, give it to them right then and there. Those people typically they need time to kind of cope. I think there's one model that kind of goes through that. I can't remember the name. I read the book a while ago, but it's sort of like the grieving process of when you lose somebody, right? There's shock, and then there's denial, and then there's
Yeah.
acceptance, and certain things like that. So, the key thing is again, to communicate always and often with what the change is and why we are changing. That's what people want to know, especially as generations change too. The millennials are becoming a major part of the workforce. Millennials are in their 40s now. Millennials are different than Gen X and baby boomers. They want to know why more often. They're not so much order takers is maybe baby boomers were. They need to understand fundamentally why the company is making this decision, why it's for good. So I think change management is only going to get more important for executive teams to be able to navigate through, especially as millennials, uh, they're now directors, VPs, they're owning companies now. Soon they're going to be, in C suites of big organizations. They already are. So, yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. I mean, thoughts on that, Don?
Yeah, so I mean, the curve that you're talking about essentially is the cubular Ross curve, right, for change management. I'm mispronouncing it, but so
Yeah, yeah,
essentially it does go through kind of those human elements of change as well. But yeah, um the the only other thing that I would, sort of add to it from a systems perspective, right, is that oftentimes if it's a system change, there's normally like, some level as organizations grow, there's some level of a committee, right? I mean, so if we go back to the ERP example, right? I mean, there may be questions initially like, are we going to include, an HR module inside of our ERP system?
yeah.
I don't advise this, but I mean, there are companies that sort of do that, right? I mean, there's certainly standalone HR systems that are better than pushing it down into your ERP system and running, your recruiting and everything else, from your ERP. And I know that there are certainly advocates. We'll probably get comments on this comment, but there's certainly advocates for, no, you should have everything in one system. But I would kind of, anybody that's been around long enough to see like a thing that has everything packed into it, normally that means that it doesn't do everything well, right? And it has like its very successful elements to it. And then if you're not careful, you can essentially burden your company with technology that's not helpful. But this is where these committees kind of, come up with what are requirements for, things. Well, I mean, as those requirements come together, it's a great opportunity to again communicate the change. Hey, we're changing.
Yeah.
This is what the committee came up with in terms of our requirements, just to let everybody know here are kind of, the vendors that we're shopping around with, and letting you know. And then you get people that want to be a part of it, right? They want, hey, look, I'm on the outside today, but I'd love to be, in on the inside and sort of see the way the sausage is made. And there'll be other people who be like, I don't, I want to stay away from that thing as far away as I could possibly be. And unfortunately, whenever it gets implemented, maybe there'll be just, somebody that has the change forced on them. So yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying though. And I do think maintaining some level of stakeholder matrix, if you're the person that's sort of responsible for, like, are people angry or not, and I wouldn't put this on the most senior executives of any company, right? I think there are other people in the company normally that can manage this, but essentially, like, who is where in terms of adopting the change. And to your point about, having having it at the level, not at the person level, right? So you don't necessarily have to have, Ron and Don down on the matrix, as, either for or against the change, but you could have it as, hey, look, most of the people at the middle level are bought in
Yes.
or not.
Mhm.
And at the bottom level, maybe they're totally against it. Well, how do we change that? Right. And sort of thinking through.
Exactly. And that's how I tried to think of it, just to make it kind of simple. Because what I've seen in the past, is, this arduous exercise of going through 500, 1,000 people and trying to decide, are they for or against the change. But ultimately, uh, it's sometimes easier just to group them,
Mhm.
and then we start there, right? We started, are, first of all, is the executive, is the board bought in? Like, where did this change come from? Oh, was this proposed to the board? Is the board bought in? Is the executive team bought in? Is their next level bought in? Is the mid level bought in? And then, you can kind of start to see, depending upon what the change is, uh maybe if the bottom level is bought in, maybe it's not quite as big of a deal because the change, um really isn't going to impact them as much. Maybe it is a big deal, but at least it gives you a sense of where to start to prioritize, where you need to do your messaging, rather than going through, 1,000 people. Also, uh, whether we like it or not, there are certain people in our organization that are very critical to it operating, and
Yeah.
that is a fact. And as well as I do, coming from M&A world and integration, right? Some of these companies are good. You're buying the team, you're buying the people. So some people are so important that you really do need to get them bought in. And even though they may be at the same level as somebody else, just because of maybe where the company is, or what department or organization they own, that their opinion about it matters more than other people. So, I think it's to go, and I've been doing those tick by tick by tick exercises with executives. Arduous. I don't think it's as valuable. You break it up, you make it simpler. Um, but yeah, you ultimately, you need people to buy in. But more than anything, too, when you change, you have to tell people what to do as well. Like, we need to. It's not just, okay, so we communicate the change, uh, and I'm not even talking about a change plan. Like, that's just a change plan. We need to now tell, okay, this is what we're going to do. If we're going to implement a new ERP system, this is what needs to happen. And that is part of the change too, because we have to execute it. So, I'm a big believer and a bias towards execution. And change is great, but if we can't set smart objectives for the key people that are going to drive this change, if we can't uh, deputize change agents, oftentimes that's a good thing to do, right? Like, for each department, right, you find somebody, not an executive, but somebody that has their
Right.
thumb on the pulse. They're
Right.
popular. People know them. You put them together. You find ways to scale this and implement this in a way you get them bought in, because ultimately it has to go. You have to direct them. You have to set smart objectives. You have to go through the change. You have to see the post change performance, because there's nothing more unsettling and demoralizing if you go through a big change process and you didn't see the results. And people want to, you have to see those results. So you have to also have that bias towards the execution of change, because you'll lose your credibility with your people if you go through a big change and it fails, or you implement, let's say, NetSuite, which I've seen happen, and pull the plug on that a year later for something else because it wasn't the right system. So, uh, again, I guess my theme there is bias towards execution of the change and actually seeing that future state performance management manifest.
Yeah, and I mean, I would also like to sort of talk for a minute about people who see here and now versus people who can envision the future. Let's just talk about it that way. Um,
Sure.
we are all different in terms of the way that we perceive the world, and the whatever maker that you believe in essentially made us all different in that way, and so if you're not somebody who can sort of look at the state that you're in today and envision a better place whenever this change comes about, because of the fact that maybe you're stuck where you are today, maybe you don't have enough details to even know. um, there certainly are different classes of people during a change that sort of take on different roles. I feel like either in supporting or resisting the change, right? So
Mhm.
supporters, examples, I feel like you just classified quite a few of them in your description. One is the individual that more or less is bought in and just completely like on board. They're well connected. They're sort of communicating, hey, look, I really I like what this is going to be, and I look forward to the future. There's the other people though that sort of see the here and now, or maybe they don't have the details around what the future will be, and that just sort of causes a lot of anxiety for those individuals about am I going to be able to do my job tomorrow? When am I going to be able to function? Is this thing going to cause additional work? I mean, that's one of the added benefits oftentimes of implementing something new or making some form of change, is that there's additional work that comes from it, and maybe I've got more than enough to do today, and by the way, you're forcing something else on me. And so those different understanding the positions of those different roles allows you at least to think about, is this something where we need to be thinking about how are we going to support that individual through the change? If the person is truly overwhelmed, maybe you have to hire temporary help that can do things to support that person so that they can do the things that actually require their knowledge and experience to be able to do, so you can get to that future state. So I mean,
Sure.
all of these things are what I feel like change management is meant to cause you to do, and it's just taking a purposeful mind to go, make sure that you do have that thought in place.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with that, Don. Yeah, I think change is it's never easy. It's never going to be easy, but ultimately change is necessary for companies. And again, I think rather than company, it's always good to read those books. It's always good to know those models. But ultimately, like you were saying, at the end of the day, it comes down to fundamentally communication and understanding who's supporting the change, who is not supporting the change. How can we leverage the relationships and trust that we have to garner buy-in and get scale, right? If there's that person that's completely bought in the one department on the change, and they have trust with the executive team, and their department trusts that person more than the executive team, now you have an opportunity. That's where the opportunity is to communicate and save time and gain trust, through those change agents and things like that. Yeah, I think in almost everything we do in a company, in some form or fashion, requires some sort of change.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we're talking about enterprise level, type changes. But I think companies, their goal with change, again, I probably sound like a broken record. You got to get results. It's painful if you change and you don't get results. It's painful if you change and you have to go back and redo it. And that's oftentimes what I've seen in private equity. You acquire a company, uh, and basically you change everything about them. So you can buy a company and hold them and do nothing with them, leave them alone, and pro forma balance sheet stuff like that. You can have equity deals, you can have asset deals, things like that. There's so many different ways, but you know you can break a company changing
Yeah.
and think that you're doing the right thing. You really can break a company with too much change. So you have to also be, even though it might sound good on paper, some things. Oh, we're going to bring them on our ERP system, and then we're going to do this and this and this. Ultimately, change is necessary, but I think what I'm trying to say is, you have to pace change as well, and you have to make sure that the change is going to be sticky, and that it is going to work. Because if it doesn't, and you break a company, which I've seen, I don't want to. I'm using it, but you kind of make them worse than what they were. Right? We've seen companies come in. Hey, we're supposed to get these synergies. Now they're doing way worse. Their revenue's doing worse. They're losing people. We changed their ERP systems. We changed their processes. And then you have to do a little reflection and go, we thought this was going to work. We thought we were going to make them better, and we didn't. So that happens. So that's a real thing. I also advise my clients is that if we're going to change, we need to get the results. It
Yeah.
has to happen. If it doesn't happen, we'll lose trust, and we're going to hurt the people that we tried to help. So, and that's sort of the thing is, you know, you get so excited about this change, you get people to believe it, almost to evangelicalize it, and then if you don't get the results, there's nothing more demoralizing. So again, bias towards execution, bias towards performance with change, bias towards communicating it up and down. That's how I think about trying to keep it simple. For executives, certainly these models are good, but like you said, and I think you hit the nail on the head, writing a 50-page, I've seen these things. Here's our crazy change management plan with all our change management people and this, and it just it really it didn't have any value. If you just would have stuck to the fundamentals and trusted how you normally do your work and just do these fundamental change things right, you should see not only, people get buy-in in the change, you'll see the results, your company will get better. So yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, I feel like, a good example of this overall is, in simple things like implementing OKRs is another simple example to me of change. People are terrified in small companies when they go to broadly, implement OKRs, and or KPIs, whatever
Sure.
metric system that you want to use for today. And you know, the first thing that typically comes up is, hey, look, if we do this, and everybody starts to see that we're going to measure things, they're going to be afraid of, the result. Well, I mean, to me, that's where leading from the top really comes, into play. But the same exact thing whenever I watch people post on LinkedIn, unfortunately, so many people talk about OKRs, and then they'll give you a list of an example list of 200 possible metrics that you can have in your organization. I guarantee, if you have 200 metrics, you're not paying attention to the top metrics, and you're going to drive your organization straight into a wall. And it's the same thing with change. I feel like there's this, when we get to next week and we start to talk a little bit more about like lean principles for operational excellence, right, is the topic for next week. But the whole idea around a lot of the lean implementation is like, you do a Kaizen event or some form of change event, and then you have a stabilization period. whatever that stabilization period is, you're essentially allowing the organization to heal from change, in that time period. And then you're going to hit them again. I mean, it just doesn't stop, at any point in time. And so this level of, getting the organization used to change will sort of reinforce this idea that, hey, look, this is just the way we are. We're just going to continue to implement and get better and do things to drive this organization in a way that actually makes us better at the end of the day. And we're going to watch and observe and use all the tools to the advantage of getting there as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. You have to build a culture, and that really, to be honest, a lot of these things blend together. It's a culture of change management is sort of a culture of continuous improvement, right? This is what we do. We
Right.
go through this all the time, and you can see that in some companies that this is just what we do, and everybody knows it. Here's the next thing that's going to come. We're going to change. We're going to improve. We're going to get better. We are never standing still. But then you have some companies that they kind of hold status quo, and sometimes they have their reasons for that, right? They're cash cows. They're not growing. They're happy with where they are, but again, new management, new vision. Now they want to grow. So now you got to take a organization that has no CI culture, no change culture, and then hit them with change. So it definitely, I think it's a great point you made. In assessing the business's ability to change and participate in it. But also, I talk about results a lot, but I also want to talk about feelings
Mm,
because regardless, I'm not a big feelings guy, uh, but I really understand as a business leader that feelings are important to people. And even though feelings and results are different, feelings are important to a lot of people. So the way you go about change and how change makes them feel, uh, and after the change, even if maybe the results, maybe the change was meant to ultimately, I don't know, reduce or increase our net margins or something like that, or maybe it was something else strategic, and we don't get there. But if people feel better about what we put in place, they were able to go through it and execute it. They like working at the company more. Maybe you didn't hit your ultimate goals, but people feel good. That's still a win. It's still kind of it's still kind of a win if you hit your performance goals and people don't feel good. Obviously, don't want people to not feel good, but it's a balance there, right? I mean, you want to be able to perform, hit your goals. You want people to feel good doing it. And again, I think that goes back to what you were saying: is if you have a culture of CI, you have a culture of change. People should know the drill. They should feel good about these things, and yeah, it's just that's one of the things I think, again, HR, your change agents in those departments can really help you with understanding how do people feel. All surveys, right, on before and after, can be helpful in understanding if that change, people are seeing it help in the absence of actual, financial or operational metrics. So there's certainly a lot of things to cover, but I like what you were kind of, you were building to kind of that, organizations that are prepared for change, know how to do it, know how to run through the playbook, and some that don't. So
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think in addition to that, I mean, there is a level of also understanding that a business is a business, but that the human side of change, right, is really what we're, mostly talking about trying to influence. And in some cases, there just isn't going to be a happy medium. An example that I have, sort of led through personally is working with a machine shop, and essentially we were implementing continuous flow. We were taking them from a process where the guy that ran kind of the main machine, the main CNC machine, we sort of took a look at things from raw material coming into him, all the way through to air cutting of the tools, all the way through to handing off to final inspection. And what that took away from this individual was the ability to come in the morning, eat his breakfast at his leisure, set up his machine whenever he chose to do so, read the newspaper the entire time that the machine was running, and whenever he decided to get up again and open the door on the machine, then that's when the part went off to QC. And now all of a sudden he had tasks to do at the moment that he stepped into his workspace all the way through to the end of the day. And we essentially implemented it so that it was continuous flow, and made sure that this individual was going to spend his entire shift, when he was not on break or at lunch, walking. And so, it was a totally different environment that he was going to be in. And the reality was he was not happy. And that just, at the end of the day, you're not going to change manage your way out of that. I mean, if the individual wants to come into work to a job where they're going to be able to sit a good portion of the day and not work, then that just is the reality of where you are. And you also have to be able to recognize that and just sort of have a discussion to say, hey, look, I mean, either this individual is eventually going to come along, or maybe they're not the right person for that particular, level of the activity either. And, the business has to make a decision at that point in time. Would you rather go back to what you had, or are you at a point where you actually need this from a productivity and moving the company forward standpoint?
Yeah, no, you're right there. And I'm not saying this about all people that are against change, because certainly, I've been against certain changes. I'm sure, and I know other people have, but a lot of the times, the people that are loudest against change, sometimes they're the ones that have something to lose, and oftentimes that is their comfortability in their job. Their, because when we're changing, we're getting better, right? And to your point earlier, we're trying to find non-value added time and make it value added. So what you're essentially doing to somebody's, yeah, some of these folks are going to have to start working more. It exposes certain cracks and certain things like that. So there is a business element to it where, you know, yeah, some people are not going to be happy, and that's just going to be the way it's going to be. And if they're not happy with it, it's a capitalism, it's a free country. Uh, they're certainly welcome to go work somewhere else that has, an environment that is conducive to that. But when you decide to make a change and you say, hey, we're going to do continuous flow, right? But when people work, they're on shift, they're going to be working the entire time. Certainly, and we're not talking about change where we put people under undue stress, but yeah, the expectation is if you're on a shift, you're working the entire time. And some people, that's a big change for them, and they don't like it. Some people like that. They go, oh my god, I hate sitting around doing nothing. I want to be, and those you need those type of people. Those are the people you want in your shop. But obviously, labor's expensive right now, and labor's tough right now. So there is a balance. But you're 100% right. It's a business, and at the end of the day, there's not going to be middle ground. Some people are going to be unhappy. You have to be okay with that, and they have to participate in the change. And if they don't, then the company needs to find somebody that will. And ultimately, that's just sometimes the tough decisions you have to make.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like there's a way to get there and kind of understand a little bit of it as well. But I also think, from the individual standpoint, that sort of considering, hey, look, my world is changing, and so I want to consider, going somewhere else. Oftentimes the grass is not all green, in the new place either. So you're going to put yourself in a position where, you just might as well, consider, is it worth sort of absorbing the change inside the organization, and working through it as well. And I feel like, it is, that level of having conversations and working through it, is very much, what change management is all about. It's sort of, trying to find a way on both sides to find, where is that right place. Interestingly enough, I heard something this morning where one individual that is fairly new, newly college educated, let's just put it that way, younger, newly college educated, came out as a graphic artist. Well, AI is changing that industry drastically by the minute, right? I mean, you can go to AI and describe any sort of picture that you want and get at least something that is
Yeah.
slightly representative, unlike what I could actually sit down with a and design myself. And so the complaint was coming that, hey, look, I learned Adobe InDesign. I spent a lot of time, really trying to figure this out, and went to school for arts and graphics, and now I see this changing. Well, the same exact example was handed back to them, that all of these things, both when when the internet was implemented, when the person used to run like the printing press and things like that. I mean, a lot of us get our news anymore on the internet, and read online, and don't even get a physical newspaper anymore.
Yeah.
So let alone all of those jobs that have continued to sort of adjust and shrink, over time. And now this individual, as a newly college educated person, was feeling the impact of the changing world. And that's just where we live, man.
Yeah, no, well, now you're talking about sort of those really big macro environment changes, and that's a really good analog to this, because it's kind of the same thing, right? When the internet came out, you know, yeah, you had to get information from newspapers. You had to get information from, your Britannica Encyclopedia, stuff like that. Traditional media was the one to give it to you. But now with the advent of the internet and social media, these companies have, and this is where, it's not voluntary change, right? We're not, this is forcible change. Like, you have to change with it. And sometimes it's better to, you know, uh, just sort of accept, like, AI is not going away. It's not, you have to accept it, and see how you can leverage this new change, this new environment, to continue doing what you're doing. It doesn't mean, and I think that's the thing, everybody wants to continue to provide value, right? People want to solve problems, they want to work, they want to feel good. So they get nervous when there's change. Will I be able to, you said that earlier, will I be able to do my job? Which means, will I still be able to help these customers?
Mm-hmm.
Will I still be able to help people? And I think, as long as, no matter what the change is, whether it's company driven, macro environment, macroeconomic, you have to leverage what that new environment is to continue your mission and doing your job. Resisting change, resisting, I don't buy that internet stuff. The companies that didn't embrace the internet are the companies that fell behind, right? The companies that did it and leveraged that are the companies that were able to move forward and do great things. And uh, it's again, I think there's a certain level of, like you said, kind of acceptance of it in an environment that you can't change. So you just have to kind of go with it and continue your mission in your life. So if that guy's a graphic artist, AI is a good tool for it. There's ways he can be a better artist and sell and do and offer even with AI.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of accepting that this is a new environment, and we have to all change with it. Things have changed for me in my consultancy practices since the rates have changed. Right, that has thrown private equity into chaos with these variable rates. So a lot of the things in the initiatives they were doing, they're not doing as much of anymore. So it's required me to do changes in how I do my consultancy. And I'm not going to fight that. I'm not going to I have to recognize where the environment is, where the change is, and what I need to do to continue helping people. So I think at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. No, I think that all good points, right? I mean, I think one, for the business that has some new capability, try and figure out how do you use that capability as an advantage. As a graphic artist, I mean, heck, imagine a time whenever you had to sit down and come up with every idea by yourself. Now,
Mhm.
you could crank out 100 ideas in a matter of seconds, with a description, and then from that build something even better for your clients. I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be an AI design at the end. I mean, it could be something that, hey, in the original sort of formation of it, it was AI cranking out multiple different examples and then sort of using those examples to go, okay, do you like this better or that better? And then in the end, the client chooses, and you create a final design. Um, and in the, in the broader example, overall in terms of our environment, hopefully you're also taking a broader look in terms of, how, not only how do you build your consultancy, let's say today, but also how do you power things, for the future up to, 3 years, from now, how do you sort of, think about the future and the strategic advantage that you might have, through some of the things that are out there as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I know I still need to do a better job of it, but yeah, I think well, I'll leave everybody and you with this. I think Don, change management is so critical for executives to be thinking about. They certainly should be educated on the models, the frameworks out there, Pro C, AdCar, um, um, what's his Butler? Is it
John
who?
Cotter. John Cotter.
Cotter,
Yep.
It's Cotter's. His steps. So there's a lot of different methods, but if we keep it simple, we communicate. We accept that there's going to be some resistance to change, and we're able to power through and get the performance and make sure everybody as best we can feels good and is treated with dignity and respect during the change. That's as simple as you can make it. Uh, Most businesses know what the right thing to do is, or they should at least. So if they're making a change, they're not doing it to hurt the company. So it's a
Right.
matter of just communicating why they're doing it so everybody can get better, everybody can feel better, customers can get more, and everybody's enriched. And if you can communicate that and execute that and see the performance, to me, that's what change management excellence is. It's not a 100-page plan with a bunch of gobbledygook.
Right.
So,
Spiral bound, went to the
yeah.
printer.
Yeah,
Click.
put it in page protectors in a binder, put the thing in the binder, and here
Yeah.
got the change management plan. That's I think we're both in agreement that that's probably not the best way to go about it. But yeah.
Yeah.
So those are my final thoughts, I guess.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think it's a good summary overall. So, the topic that I have up for us next is implementing the lean principles for operational excellence. So, we'll cover that in the next episode of this. If you're seeing the live video, typically it's going out via YouTube and LinkedIn. We do this Thursdays at noon Eastern. And if you're hearing the audio version of this, on any of your favorite podcast platforms, then hopefully you're subscribed and things like that as well. And so whether on YouTube or picking up the audio version, please do subscribe. Ron, where can people connect with you?
Yeah, people can find me on LinkedIn under my LinkedIn page, Ronald Eggert. They can find my LinkedIn page, Propellant Consulting. They can find me on propellantconsulting.com. They can email me at roneggert at propellantconsulting.com. You can text me if you've got my number. It's in my messaging. So I'm very easy to find. I am over the next week. I've got some people helping me redesign my website, my LinkedIn page for Propellant Consulting, and stand up a Twitter account and a couple other things. So a lot of exciting things that are going to kind of all stitch together. So my services will be easier to find. But for now, those are the best places to get a hold of me.
Perfect. And if you're looking for me, so there's two places that I would suggest that most people go. I'm hard to find on LinkedIn, so the easiest place to go is to go to improvingprocesses.com if you're more interested in change management and things that we're talking about here. if you're interested in digital marketing and possibly starting something, similar to this, then you would go to d3dm.com. So it's d3digitalmarketing.com. And both of those will work, by the way. So I bought both URLs there. There's phone numbers and everything else included on that, as well as LinkedIn connections, so that you can find my LinkedIn easier that way. So thanks a lot for watching or listening, and we wish you well.
Very good.